Welcome back to the Salted Orange Podcast. My name is Matthew,
My name's Luke.
and we're here to bring you another episode this week about growing up in the church. So last week we talked about visiting people. Specifically, we talked about jail and that kind of stuff. So if you missed that episode, go back and check it out. And of course, if you're with us on our platforms, make sure you're leaving your comments and your thoughts on the episodes in the comment section or in the question and answer section, or reaching out to us via Twitter. But Luke, we're gonna start with some questions that I'm gonna ask you first, since I'm starting the episode. Ooh, it's fun to start the episode because you get to ask the question and I get to rebuttal against what you say. So, what kind of
Mm,
experiences have you dealt with or heard about from other people whose parents work in the church?
Well, both of our parents worked in the church, so um, I like to think that this is a good topic for us to discuss because our we it it's firsthand account for us. I definitely feel like you have more pressure on yourself when your parents grow up in church, like when your parents work in the church. I definitely felt that. I felt that I had to be either involved or perfect. I wouldn't say I have to be like necessarily absolutely perfect, but like you definitely have that shadow over your head saying, if you do something bad, it's gonna be bad on everyone else. But um, I've definitely heard from a couple of other people that have parents working in church that like you get to see the backgrounds and you get to see who really runs the church and what kind of power struggles are happening in the church. Um, I think that's one thing that normal people don't see. So like if there's anyone listening that's just like I only go on Sunday and I really don't talk to a lot of people, then you're not going to I mean, this might be interesting for you, but also you're probably not going to be able to relate to this well because this is something where you have to really be there for a long time to start to see these kinds of experiences and see how to deal with people.
Yeah,
Would you agree?
I would say like the word that you kept dancing around and didn't ever say was like we were examples. So
Mm-hmm.
like you were expected to be like the model child or youth
Mm-hmm.
in the program. It's like, oh, we're answering questions, we're behaving, we're not getting into trouble, all those kinds of things. Which, if you knew me as a kid, that was none of what I was, because I definitely was a problem. But I wasn't terrible. I wasn't terrible.
Yeah.
But I didn't necessarily grow up with my dad being a pastor the whole time. Like, he started when I was in like middle school being a pastor, so I wasn't really a pastor's kid, or didn't really have the traditional my entire life experience. It's definitely made it different when I was in middle school because I was older, and then I had a little bit more wisdom under my belt, so I can kind of be like, okay, I need to behave in this situation, or okay, nobody's paying attention, I can act out a little bit. But I do think that pressure that you're talking about is important, because I've met with other people who were pastors' kids, and similar to what we've been saying, it's like you have that sort of pressure to be perfect, and people put a lot of judgment on you, which you shouldn't be doing in the first place. But they put a lot of judgment on you because you're like, okay, you were kind of a reflection of your parents at that point. And most kids, even if you aren't a pastor's kid, you are, I guess, a reflection of your parents. I mean, you're literally half and half of each of them. But
Mm-hmm.
the reflection is like, oh, they can't actually parent, or they look bad because we're misbehaving, or something like that, which isn't really the case. Kids just are kids, and think things are okay until you tell them they're not, and then might try to get away with it because they really want to do something, and you have to just correct them over and over again, which is part of our job as the church, to just help guide them the right way. Like, hey, maybe
Mm-hmm.
don't do that thing. Don't pull out Susie's hair. It's just say hi to Susie instead. don't misbehave.
Yeah, I've been watching this guy on he's kind of TikTok. Well, it's not even a guy, it's a little kid. He's like 6 years old. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. His
Nope.
name's Pastor Luke.
Nope.
And it's not actually, my name's Luke, but it's this little boy who his dad's a pastor, and they're kind of in a Pentecostal church. And so he gets up and they like actually let him like preach, which I don't
Yeah, I've seen
necessarily
that.
know if it's actually like preaching, because really, I mean, he's a little 6 year old kid. I mean, he may be able to, I haven't watched enough on him, but it kind of has got me thinking, like, when you're a little kid, like, they even expect you to grow up and take people's
Hmm.
places. Like,
Right.
a lot of people when I was younger were like, "You're gonna take your dad's job when he grows up," because my dad's a music minister, so like he is a worship pastor and stuff like that. And everybody was like, "You're gonna take his job when you grow up," and I'm like, "No, I don't. I don't want to play the organ. I don't want to. I mean, I play piano. I teach piano lessons, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm good enough to, play in church, and I don't really want to. I like singing in church, but I've never wanted that kind of role. I really want the youth pastor role, as I've probably told you before. But um, to say that, like, that is something that really bugged me when I was a kid, is like that they always expect you to take over where your parent was.
Hmm.
Um, I know you're kind of like, I mean, you're not in a pastor role right now, but I would say, like, people when you were like in middle school, they were like, "You're gonna go be a pastor and replace your dad." Did you feel like you were the same as me, kind of deal?
I mean, I guess there is that like tension to kind of like inherit the family business for terms that people would understand. So like
Hmm.
that's an idea. Um, I don't think necessarily I was classified that way as like going to take my father's position, or like follow in the footsteps. I mean, I was on that track pretty much the same time that he started on that track, so it was comparable that I was like, okay, it makes sense that he would be doing this, but he's doing this at the same time or alongside. So it's not really like you can um I wouldn't say you really like it was gonna happen. It's not like you can like put that on me. It was like that was what I'd already chosen to start it and pursue.
Hmm.
So you couldn't really be like, oh yeah, that's gonna be you. It's like your work. I was already working towards it, so I didn't really
Yeah, my thing
have
was
that per
like
se.
I was already going into music, so like, I was by like I wasn't already like going into college for music, because this was way before I was even in college. But I was already like liking music, and that's just because in my family, like, we love to sing, we love to be musical.
Right.
But the way I always looked at it was like, you know, that's my dad's dream. It's not really mine. Like, I don't want to, have to take my dad's dream. And there was a point in my life where I did want to take over, but I was also like, I will never be as good as him because he's very good at it. But I wanted it to be my own thing. One thing I've been working on a lot recently is trying to distinguish myself from my parents' like shadow. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
you've ever had that kind of
Yeah.
feeling. And I think a lot of people have had that before. Um, and so I think a lot of times when you grow up in church, you do hide behind that shadow a lot, and so that's where you can really get hurt by it. Um, and you cannot. I guess you always are pressured to be better. I mean, but it can be a good thing to have that kind of pressure. But also, I feel like um, they always have like a common stereotype that pastors' kids like always end up turning bad. You know, I, so it's like you know I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I've definitely known of a couple that have like turned from their faith just because of the pressure they had to deal with.
Yeah. I think you are right. It could go either way, really. You could have somebody who is very into it, and it's like, oh yeah, this is what I'm doing with my life. Or they could have somebody who's really rebellious against it. And you could even have somebody who like flip flops between the two. It's like there was a point where I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't know if I want to do this as what I want to be doing for the rest of my life. And then I came back to it. So it's like, everybody has their own journey to walk. And I think that's what you were saying that's so important. It's like it can't be the same thing. So often in churches, I feel like we want to do I'm getting preachy. So often in churches, we want to do the same thing that's been working for all these years. I say working with air quotes because it's not really working. It's just kind of sustaining, not
Mm-hmm.
growing. And then eventually, if you're just sustaining, eventually people are going to die and the church just kind of starts falling apart because you're not getting new people in. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's part of the struggle too with our generations. Like we really want to make it our own. We're so individualized because of the society we live in that it has to be us making the choice. It has to be our way of doing it. It can't be what somebody else has done and us inheriting it. You have to let us really, for the kids, you have to really let us cook. You
Mm-hmm.
gotta let us cook with our own ideas and our own thoughts. Let us make our mistakes. You can help us along the way, but it's really got to be us in the driver's seat, figuring out these positions and figuring out what we want to do with it. Because the world that our parents occupied and the world that they, started their careers in doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. I mean, if I was to say like some moments where I felt like the pressure, and I still feel the pressure. Um, there's sometimes on a Sunday morning that if something goes wrong with the sound or something doesn't sound, correct in my ears,
Mm-hmm.
I feel the pressure even though it's not my job. Like I don't get paid to do the music or do the sound or anything at my church, but like I still feel that pressure just because I want to make sure that my dad has a good, you know, that doesn't look bad on my dad. And it's not because like I think that it's just naturally ingrained to me. I'm like, but it really kills me sometimes because I'll come home from church and I'm like, I don't even want to go to church because I feel all that pressure. But I think sometimes it is good for me because I get to build from it and learn new skills. But also, it's I don't like the pressure. Sometimes I want the feeling of just going to church and sitting down and listening to the message and actually getting to worship. Because I can feel a lot of times, and I bet pastors' wives feel this a ton. Obviously, I'm not a pastor's wife, but I definitely feel like probably they feel the same tension of like they have to make sure things go right so that way, you know, their significant other is, you know, elevated, as I would say.
Yeah, so they don't
But
look bad. Get it?
hmm because I mean, and it doesn't just I wouldn't say it's just for pastors, kids, but it's also just people working in the church. They're always just scared that something bad's gonna happen. Um, but I think one thing that this generation is changing, and I like it, is that they're embracing more of the whatever happens on Sunday morning happens. Like it's like you don't have to worry about um, something going wrong because that's just part of it. There's definitely some churches though, like some of these mega churches that like are so choreographed it's unreal.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that was one big moment for me, and it happens constantly throughout my life is that I'm worried that things will go wrong and that it will look bad on either me or my dad or anyone in the church that I'm always nervous. I mean, but you probably feel nervous when you get up to preach at some point.
No,
Uh,
I've done it too much. Like, unless I'm like know it's gonna be like a very like controversial message where it could go really bad, that I would be nervous. But for the most part, you know, I'm like I was given this message to preach, so I'm gonna do it. And it's not for me to decide what comes out of it, which is gonna be there. I like your points too. I think for me, like I wouldn't say even my dad being a pastor was part of it, but like even going back further before either of them were, like my parents were so involved in the church. It's like if I had the ability to help them with something, I was helping them with something like similar things to sound. Like I ran the sound for my dad for many years. Um, I literally can't go home and visit my parents and go to church with them without being given like the
A job, yeah.
the lead singer for the day, so like they can follow you in the congregational songs and stuff. Like I'm always doing something. So it's I like the idea of like actually going to worship, and I was thinking about it. Like I did have an experience a couple weeks ago where I was able just to go to worship and worship, but for the most part, like the church I go to now, I don't have that opportunity because I'm always like, oh, something's going wrong, we need you to help here, or I'm singing in the choir. It's like unless I go somewhere that they don't know me and I'm not with
Hmm.
anybody, I that's the only way I can like truly worship, because if not, they're gonna be like, "Oh, you can sing, so you're gonna lead music," or "Oh, you know how to do this, so let's help them with let's do ushering, or let's do this or do that, work with the kids." Like I'm always thrown into something because I can do those things. So unless they don't know me, that's the only way I get out of it. Which I think that can be seen as a negative experience. I would say it's helpful for me because that's just how I like to serve. Is
I
I'm
think it's
always
definitely
doing
both.
something, but it can be,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
it's
definitely think.
dual sided coin. Like you could flip it one way or flip it the other depending on how you feel. But it is nice just to have that feeling of you don't have to do this stuff. But how often are people like us gonna be like, well, I just really want to worship today. So can you get somebody else to do this and fix this? I'm sure somebody else can do it because we've been the ones who have done it for so long that they're like, yeah, you're the go-to person.
See, and I got like really big burnout when I was probably in high school, maybe middle school. Actually, it was probably high school. I got a really big burnout of church because I was doing the sound and I was the only one doing it, and I was dependent upon, and they like weren't getting another person to do it, and like I probably could have tried to get someone else, but also like it was harder for me to try to get someone than if they would have just helped me to get another person.
Mm.
So like it was like, and then people would complain when something goes wrong, and I'm like, well, I'm the only person that could do this, so you should probably not complain. But then I was like, well, I can't, even if I wanted to leave my church, which I don't, but I'm saying even if I would have, I would have been, abandoning that position, and they would have had to have another person. And so I think you can get stuck in this as a, either a pastor's kid or someone who your parents are very involved in church. I think you can get stuck in this thing where like you are so dependent upon that um you I wouldn't say you lose the feeling of church, but at some points yes, you can lose like the actual worship part, and it can just feel like a job. And like I think that's something that I'm like chasing after, is for church to not feel like a job. I mean, I definitely want to work in the church, but also like I want to enjoy worship. Which I do now, but also there is sometimes when I don't. Um, I
Yeah.
don't know if have you ever felt that way, like where you just like
I think it's like
don't enjoy it sometimes.
it depends on like the day. I feel like most of the time I feel like you have to compartmentalize like what aspects are work and what aspects are worship. Like I preached this past week and I had to really like, oh, I'm doing elements of worship, so that means I'm working. So I couldn't really take myself and be like, this is worship. It's like I had to be the one saying all these things, getting up and doing these things. I had to do the message. So it's like I don't get as much out of it when I'm the one preaching as if I was listening to a sermon. So I kind of lose elements of worship to do these things. But also there were chunks of the service that I wasn't doing anything because I kind of was like guest speaking. So
Mm-hmm.
I was able to kind of back off and just worship and do what I wanted to do. Like I'm able to center myself back into that mentality for a little bit, and then when I had to get up and preach or something like that, you're back in the work. So it's kind of like splitting and compartmentalizing your mind when it comes to those things for me. I understand like if you're doing something like sound, it's kind of like an all service kind of thing, so you can't really stop doing it. But if you have like moments where you can pull yourself out of it, I think it's helpful. I don't think it's necessarily going to solve the issue of wanting to feel like it's worship every Sunday, because part of service means that you have to give up something of yourself to do the work that needs to be done. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that part of your service requires you to give up some of your peace with just experiencing worship. Sure, there's times that you really like, look, I just need worship today. I just need to be worshiping today and not running anything. Like then you have to have somebody else there to, okay, well, Luke's not able to do sound today, you know, let this other guy do it and let Luke have a break for a day so he can recharge and come back ready to do it
Mm-hmm.
next week. I think that's what we really need to be building.
Yeah. Um, I see. There is one thing though. When I preach, though, see, I don't. When I go preach, like, I get paid like a tiny bit of money, but it's not very much. I mostly do it just because I want to.
Right.
But when I go preach, I actually do feel like I'm worshiping because all I'm there to do is preach. Like they don't get me to do all this other stuff. Like I just go up and do the sermon and that's it. And I'm like, I can actually just sit back and sing and stuff like that. So it's like, um, it's more fun. Like I enjoy it more. I always tell like the people that I preach for, I'm always like, I needed this. That's what I always say. I'm like, I needed this refresh or this recharge. Um, but it's just, I think you're definitely right where there has to be, other people to step in. Which some churches, depending on your church size, it's hard to do that. Or your generation gaps or anything like that. Like, if which a lot of churches are having problems with this. If your youth is low, then you're not going to have people being able to run sound because these older people, they can be taught, but a lot of times they either refuse to or are just they're not knowledgeable enough to be able to do it. Um, but it's just it's a two-sided coin on everything when it comes to growing up in church and stuff like that. I definitely think the foundation that church growing up in church has helped me big time because I feel like I got to understand my parents' faith a lot better because they had me going every Sunday, and I wasn't just like I didn't get the kind of experience of like finding my faith later in my life, as I would say. So I wouldn't know how to talk to somebody like that. But also, I think that for people that are just now having kids, it is great. We need to get back to this habit of, you know, getting them back in church for their morals and stuff like that. Would you agree?
Hey, yeah, morals and education and a foundation. Like if we're providing them all the access they need to make choices later in life about if they actually want to follow Christ or not, then there's only so much we can do before it's their choice ultimately. But if we have prepared them and given them reasons that it's valuable, then we've done our job and we've done good. And you kind of jumped to our second question. So you talked about how church helped you. So I think this is a really important question. So I think anyone can answer this at home. So like, did you growing up in the church help or hurt your faith? If you're somebody who grew up in the church, you can answer that. If not, then how is it different for you? How do you experience it? What would you imagine it would be like if you grew up in the church versus just finding your faith later in life? I think for me, with the help and hurt, I agree with some of the things you said about like nice to see the back end stuff, and that has definitely helped me because in a professional field, I have no finance background whatsoever because my parents were doing it and they knew some of that stuff and they were involved with it. I got to see what happened and how like church finances were handled, so I knew all that stuff. And then I walk into a church that I'm serving and they're like, "We have no idea how to do financial stuff." I'm like, "Cool. I have all this information about how we budget our money and how we send our money out and use our money to do mission that I was
Mhm.
able to help them restructure what they were doing." And I think you can learn a lot of skills in the church, not just like public speaking through preaching or like how to sing through being in choir or these other things. But there's so many opportunities for you to develop like professional skills in leadership, public speaking, skills in service, uh, listening to others, really listening to others and understanding things. So you learn so much that I feel like it helped me not only spiritually, but it helped me in practice of daily living and pursuing a career that I was able
Mhm.
to find my way forward and have these skills. It's like, oh yeah, I did this when I was a kid, like, or I did something similar to this, or oh, I remember that thing that happened when I was a kid that I can relate to what I'm doing now that tells me how to handle the situation. It's about experience, I think. So as long, having that experience has helped me keep my faith even when times where there
Mhm.
was like I don't want to do this anymore or Sunday's my day to catch up on sleep. I don't want to go to church. Day like that happened to me at some point in my life. I'm not proud to admit it, but it has happened. But it was the thing that brought me back into it. You know, it's like I was able to help out this other church. So it's like, yeah, I found my place again and was able to help.
Yeah, I think the only thing that hurt my faith was you got to see the power struggles.
Yeah,
But I think in any church you're gonna see those power struggles.
eventually, yes.
Um, which that's because the church is just human, and it's just like any other organization that you would be a part of. I mean, you're gonna see the power struggles of, this person wants to take the church this way, this person take wants to take the church the other way. So like, um as I say, church is full of sinners, so like, trying to be better, and it was made for sinners. So like we're all human, like we're gonna still have those power struggles that we bring from the outside world into the church. But I think that I have seen some great compromise in the church at some point, um, which is great. Um, but I think that that's what really that is my big moment of like where growing up in church has like hurt my faith, is where I've seen the backgrounds of like the power struggles. Because sometimes you don't want to see that. Sometimes you just want to, come in and worship and feel like everything's going fine and not have to worry about finances and all that stuff. Because some people forget that a church, is still, has to have money to stay open. It has to be like a business. Um, and some people hate when you say, you got to run a church like a business, but nowadays that's just how it's working to keep the doors open.
Mhm. Yeah. I think with like your idea of like the power struggle, that is gonna happen in every church. I remember I wrote about it in my thesis, and it was such a memorable quote that like using it. It's like church is really the final frontier where all generations are gonna be together. Like think of
Mm-hmm.
any other setting, that we're really interacting with each other. Like sure, we might go to like a sporting event and we all might be there, but are we really interacting with each other? Not really.
Mm.
We're kind of just interacting with what's going on. Church is like a really the only place where all of us are going to connect like that, and those differences are going to show up. So yeah, I do think having worked in the church and having seen, because of my parents, the differences in the power struggle, it does kind of make you want to walk away from it a little bit, just because you're like, this is really what we're doing, and we're supposed to be people who love each other and care about the well-being of each other, and we're fighting over, who's bringing spaghetti and meatballs to the potluck. Like, that's
Exactly.
what we're fighting over. Is this really that big of a deal? But it does matter to people. Like, we have to really consider the human element of, what's important to people and how that's going to affect what we're doing in the church. And it's not just one generation's choice. Like, you can't just have a bunch of old people running the church, because that church in 20 years dies because they die.
Hmm.
You have to have the combined efforts of everybody in the building. And, if you don't have generation differences, that should be your first sign that something's wrong.
Yeah,
Because if it's a
exactly.
place where everybody comes together, you're missing everybody because you're only one demographic. And then that's probably where you need to find some outside help to be like, okay, what can we do to change our church? And we really got to listen. That's the other tough part, is like, we got to listen. And that's probably the number one thing that it's hurt me with my faith. And there are some people that make a mule look like it's easy to change its mind. Like, they will not change whatsoever. Like, they will take how they feel to the grave, and even when they're done out of the grave, like, they'll come back and like possess something to keep it the way it was. Like, it is crazy how much we care about what we've, like, our traditions and what we've done, that we don't see how it's affecting somebody else and how it's stopping them from really coming into our space of community and working together. And I just can't get over that when I see it happen. It's like, is this really that important to you that you're going to deny somebody else a chance to have faith here because
Mm,
you want this thing?
yeah. Yeah, it's I think you'll never find we'll never but I think that's the beauties of church is that there's so many different kinds of opinions and so many, even in a Methodist church you'll find some Methodist, Baptist, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
or even in a Baptist church you'll find some Methodist, Baptist, it goes hand in hand. You're never gonna have a purebred, whatever denomination you are, or if you're non-denomination, you're still going to have some form of another church just because of, your backgrounds and where you grew up. Um, and I think that's why, you know, us having those foundations is bringing different kinds of looks into different kinds of churches. I think that's why I definitely want to work in a different kind of church because I want to bring what I've grown up with and my faith experience and try to um not change, but try to see a different avenue of what church is like. Because I am always amazed when I go to a different church and like something is done different because I'm like, oh my gosh, that was so much different than I've
Mm-hmm.
ever done. Like even if someone does a song faster than we would do it, like the song the doxology that we do
Yeah.
um after offering, like some people will do it slow and some people will do it fast, and it like blows my mind because I'm like, you can't do it slow. We always do it fast. Like what the heck? And so it's just so interesting to see the differences. So I think that's why that is my favorite thing about growing up in the church is that I will take this experience from what I've my foundation, as I would say, and I can use it somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's important that we are taking that foundation and not requiring it to be the status quo, but we're taking it and like, oh, this is similar to something I have, so I can relate to it, therefore I can connect to it, therefore I have spirituality. That's like that's a very long chain of things to get to. Okay, I'm still, worshiping God. It still feels like church. Still feels like church. Like, those things have to be in place, I think. But you also have to have the space to allow others to experience their kind of church. And if it's not yours, sure, okay, maybe one week the doxology's it's really slow. Well, maybe next week it's super fast. Like, you just gotta change it up a little bit. Because ultimately, if we're doing the same thing over and over again, we just build uh, consistency, and that builds mediocrity. So it just becomes kind of a
Hmm.
thing we do, not an actual element that pushes us to, okay, why are we doing it this way? How is this affecting my spirituality? Like, those are the questions I like to deal with in the church. So you can't just do everything the same way. You have to do it differently to experience, okay, what am I supposed to hear from this method of how we're doing this? One of the big things is the communion for me. It's like we talked about this on the third episode 3. Uh, I don't like doing communion the same way. And in fact, when our pastor was gone for a bit, I never did communion the same way in the 3 months that I was filling in. And I never did it the same way he did it. I always wanted to try something different. I'm like, okay, we're gonna do this. We're gonna all come up at the same time. You know, we're gonna take both elements at the same time. Or I'm gonna come, you sit in your seats, and I'm gonna come to you and pass them out. Or we're gonna just try different things because it's how you access it, and it's how somebody accesses it might be different than how you access it. But hopefully, what that does is it leads to a conversation. It's like, okay, why is this so important? Why is it so important to have this liturgy before communion? Is that necessary? Do we have to tell the story? Can we just do the communion service? Some people say yes, some people say no. Why is that important to you? I want to know those answers. And I think it's important for us to have those conversations because it helps us build our faith. Okay, what do I believe in? Is this important? Yes, no. Talk about it, debate, discuss, have ideas thrown around, and build each other up in faith. I think it's really helpful that we are not tied to our foundations. Take your word. Not tied to them, but we use them as a basis to expand our
As a
spirituality.
foundation.
Yeah, it's the foundation to expand our spirituality to other things as we encounter them.
Mm-hmm. I think that, I mean, that's why we have our podcast here. You know, we could both get on here and just tell each other our opinions and not listen to, you know, each other's opinions. I mean, we don't always agree.
No,
But I've
go watch the
never
Salvation
been,
episode. We
yeah. And so I've never like been angry at you over
no.
something, you know, about your faith. I mean, your faith is yours. I mean, I think that's our biggest problem nowadays is like people they're always going to jump to conclusions that like your faith is wrong and mine is right. But I think it's mostly because, you know, they take that foundation and they say that foundation is, you know, what they have to believe. And I mean, I think there is core beliefs of being a Christian. That's why that's why I say the Apostles' Creed every Sunday, because, you know, that's my core beliefs of as a Christian. But I think it is, I mean, if you really wanted to have that debate of like, you know, changing your faith from your foundation, you could just say, you know, look at, you know, how we've changed the way music is done in church, which we thought about doing a podcast episode on that. We may do that, you know, in a couple of weeks, but you know, if we would have just stuck to our foundation, we'd just be still doing hymns. You know, we wouldn't have worship music or, you know, contemporary Christian music. But I think it's a new, refreshing look into what Christianity can be. So I would say, you know, the whole reason we do this podcast is because we want to look at what Christianity could be and say that we could, you know, hopefully this space could help someone else find that kind of faith that we grew up with.
Yeah, if there's any core question I'm interested in as a theologian, it's what does the church look like in 20 years? And I want to figure that out. Like, I know I can't absolutely know, but I want to have a pretty solid guess as to what it looks like. And I have an understanding of what it might be like right now, which tends to lean towards non-existence more than anything.
Yeah, me too.
But how do we, if that's what we think the future is going to be, how do we change it so it's not? We have 20 years. How do we change it so it's not? I did a sermon a couple weeks ago where I was like, you can't. It was New Year's sermon. It's like you can't be looking at your present, because as you're looking at your present, you're slowly looking at your past because it's becoming your past. You can't look at your past because you can't even see your future. You have to look at your future because that's what you want to go to, and then you make what happens now how you get there. You put
Mm-hmm.
steps in front of it so you get there. And once you get there, you pivot to whatever the next thing for your future is. You really have to look into that. I really think that's important for us to look at. So many of us are like, yeah, well, the church is fine. We've done it this way for every year. That's what we base statistics on. So what would the church look like if you did it complete opposite way? What do you think? Take a
Mm-hmm.
guess. Look at that. People are like, well, we would not be the church anymore. It's like, okay, we wouldn't be your past church. Would we maybe be the future of the church, the future church that we're looking for? I don't know. I think that's
Well,
what
I mean,
people
if
really
you
need to
look
think
at
about.
it, I mean, if you look at it, if we would have stuck to the core beliefs, we'd still be, Jews, if you're being really honest with it,
Right.
because our core beliefs are from Judaism.
Right.
And so, back then they were even fighting the future because, they have this new savior, they had Jesus, and they were like, well, he can't, he's going to change the whole thing. He's going to write this, he's going to have people write this New Testament, and it's going to not even, it's going to change what the Old Testament means and stuff like that. So it's just like, I think the church has only ever grown from change. So I think that sure we can have our foundations and sure they help, but I think moving forward there has to be change. But I think if there was a question that we were going to ask our viewers today, I was like, just what is what is your upbringing? I mean, don't tell us like specifics. You don't tell us like your exact church you went to or whatever, but like just say like, hey, I grew up in church and I had these kind of experiences. Tell us, what you didn't like about it, what you liked about it. And kind of have the same conversation we're having right now. I mean, our whole point in having this podcast is to start dialogue. But that's all I have to say about this topic so far. Matthew, you got anything else?
Yeah. We did have like one final question. We've talked about it a little bit. But just so we like categorize it. Uh, we
Mm-hmm.
were going to ask the question about how did growing up in faith give us a foundation to remain as Christians? We've kind of talked about how our foundation influences how we interact with the church, but how does it make us still remain Christian? For me, uh, it let me do things that allowed me to remain a Christian. Like I went to seminary. If I didn't have my faith anymore, if I didn't have that foundation, I would have never even considered doing something in religion. I would never have gotten a religion degree. I would have never got a master's degree in religion. That's for sure. Uh, so I think it's kept me able to experience new things, and I'm so thirsty for knowledge about religion and my religion specifically and how other religions might shape it or oppose it. What's nice about that and what's a problem with that, and seeing what other denominations are out there and what they're doing and how they believe things differently, and it's based on the same things that I believe my other foundations on, and why we got to those different points. I like figuring that stuff out. So I think my foundation in Christianity has led me to be curious. I think my curiosity is what still gets the best of me and why I still do it. It's like I think once I lose that curiosity element and just kind of start doing faith as we would think it, I would think it's
Mm-hmm.
going to become mediocre and I'm just going to be like, this is not fulfilling for me at all. So I keep trying to search for the next thing that's going to
Mm-hmm.
feed me or let me learn about who I am, especially what my faith is and what I believe. That's the foundation that keeps me going, and I think that's why I still am a Christian.
Yeah, I definitely think that my foundation has kept me as a Christian too. Just because like if I wouldn't have had it, like if I wouldn't have parents that were in church or my family being so religious, I don't think I would have kept it just because there's such a negative connotation to
Mm-hmm.
Christianity right now that like you can be seen as an outcast sometimes, and I know it can be very hard to keep your Christianity, especially when you see people that like, they'll only be a Christian for a while and then become happy. Which I talked about this um, in a sermon a couple weeks ago. I was like, some people only come to church to become happy, and then as soon as they get happy, they're gone. And we've talked about it on the podcast a little bit,
Yeah.
but it really kills me sometimes because I'm like, you know, do I only need to go to church to be happy and then go away and then be fine? Um, I mean, I don't feel like I've felt that a ton, but like I definitely have had moments in my life when I guess when I was depressed about church or something like that, that you were, your foundations keep you grounded, in faith. Um, I guess where I'm hungry for church is I'm hungry to see how this younger generation is going to get on fire about Christianity. I'm hoping they will get on fire about Christianity,
You're
and I'm
like,
trying to
when
see
I'm
how
like,
I can
there's an
help
if
them.
statement there.
Yeah.
Like, there's a big
Well,
if.
by when I mean I want to be there to help them have that
Right.
fire.
Good.
But just to say that foundation has kept me in church, and I think that's why I really want young kids like elementary school, middle school to explore their faith because I want them to have that foundation that I had.
I mean, I think there's a time period that also helps. Like, I think growing up in church, like starting when I can't remember a Sunday I didn't go to church, even having sports and other things. Like, unless I was really sick, I didn't go. Like, I've pretty much been to church every Sunday for my whole life, except for that one time period where I was like, I gotta sleep on Sunday, which I'm still not proud of.
I had that
But
moment too in college.
yeah, but I feel like that was important because it's like, okay, I learned the faith, or at least people want me to know. And then when I became a teenager, just like I just kept wanting to get more information. Like I want to make my own thoughts about it. It's part of like our generation wanting to be their own person, do their own thing.
Hmm.
Sure, our parents have taught us, our mentors have taught us, our pastors have taught us when we were kids what faith and Christianity is, but also we got to be teenagers, we got to be adolescents, we made those choices ourselves, and I think that was important for me growing up in the church. It's like if I didn't have that time period where I had a basis and I came to it later, I doubt I would be here. I doubt I would be any bit religious if I came to it later in life, which I give all the props to those people who are like, yeah, I mean I'm interested in this thing. I want to figure it out. And I'm like, how do you even get interested in church if you haven't been forced to go there when you were a kid? Like I don't understand that. So somebody please let me know that in the comment section. I would love to hear about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've really dove into a conversation that we just thought about this before
Yeah.
we were recording today, and I just thought about it because I had been thinking of my upbringing, and I was like, how has this gotten me to the point I am? Because I really do feel like God lays things out in front of you. I mean, I don't know if you've ever had the same experience. I do have that experience where like I was I'm always worried for the future. That's always my greatest fear. The future is always my greatest fear. Um, and so when you can see God lay things out, just kind of let him cascade into things, it really helps me grow my faith. So like I think that looking back, there's been a lot of things that have cascaded into each other that have helped me grow to this point, as I would say. So I think that's why I really wanted to have a conversation about this today.
And it was like literally, hey, I thought you had a topic you wanted to talk about today, Luke. We don't have any notes. What's going on? What are we
Hmm.
doing? And he's like, let's do this. I'm like, okay, here we go. Let's go for it. And I do notice those things. Like I like how I hate in the moment how I don't understand where it's going. I like looking back and being like, oh, I see what you did, God. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Like I was like, when I started doing all this stuff and really wrestling with my faith, like I stopped being a pastor for a while, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Like, did I just waste 4 years of my life getting a degree in this that I can't use? But I'm also seeing like, you know, pastor allowed me to reconnect with Luke and other people that I was friends with in high school that I'd met through this event that we did for 3 weeks, which allows me to now have lifelong friends that keep me accountable. So like there was a path, I just didn't see it, and it took a lot of really weird detours to get to that point. But there's a through line that was connected every single one of them. So I really like how those work together, and yeah, that's part of like the trust that we have to have. Is like I'm in a season right now where I'm like I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't know why how this is helping me or what I'm doing right now and where it's gonna go. But because I've seen all those things happen in the past, it's like, you know what? God's doing something. And I'm supposed to learn something here, and I won't know about it until I get beyond it. So I just gotta trust I'm going the right way, and that I'll get there. That was good. That was a good little mini sermon. There you go. I get off my soapbox now. Thank you guys for listening to the Salted Orange podcast today. If you have any questions or thoughts about what we've talked about today, feel free to leave them in our comment section down below. There's also a question and answer portion on Spotify, or you can hit us up on Twitter for more. All our links are under Salted Orange Podcast, so you just look it up, you'll find it. Not a problem. If you have a topic you'd like us to discuss, feel free to let us know that too. We always are taking suggestions. In fact, last week's episode was somebody's suggestion, so you missed that episode, go check it out. I'm gonna keep plugging it because that's what
Yeah,
I
it was a
do.
good episode.
It was a good episode. I think they've all been good episodes, but I think I'm biased.
Hmm.
So
There's some episodes that I was tired that episode. I mean, we're both tired, very tired today. We could both see each other. We're very tired,
really,
but I still think we were able to have a really good conversation because sometimes, with me and Matthew, we just have to sit down and start talking, and then we have a good conversation.
yeah, we
Um,
feed energy off of each other. It's great. It's a vicious
yeah, we
cycle.
share one brain cell sometimes,
I don't know if that's good.
but
Probably not.
yeah, but I've definitely had fun.
Yeah.
That's what every time I get on here, I'm like, I just hope I have fun. That's all I care about.
I don't think we've not. So at least on
Hmm.
my end, it's been good. Yeah. Any other final thoughts about our topic today, Luke?
Um, I mean, just let me know because I mean, I know Matthew wants to know as well, but I really want to know, what your upbringing was. Because we want youth and young adults to listen to this, so like, maybe they can give us some of their kind of opinions and stuff like that. It'd be great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're
It'll help drive
listening,
our conversations.
the big thing, I say this all the time, the big thing you can do is interact with us in the comment section. Like, even if you're like
Hmm.
watch part of this, like, even if you're just watching the ending for some reason, which I don't know why you would, but if you're just listening to this last section, just like go down and leave a comment, say hey. That's all you gotta do. Say hi. We'll say hi back. If you want to talk about these points, that'd be great. But just so we know you're listening to us, and you know, obviously this conversation is worthwhile for both of us to have, regardless of if we put it on the internet or not. But we're doing it for you guys, so hopefully you find it helpful, and I hope to figure out what's helpful to you, what's not helpful to you. That's also something you could tell us about. But before we get into the whole spiel of leaving more comments in the comments below, we're going to say goodbye today. Thanks for listening. We appreciate each of you taking the time out of your day to listen to this podcast, whether that's while you're driving, which is a good way to do the podcast, by the way. So make sure you put us on while you're driving. If you got an hour to drive somewhere, maybe to and from work. We appreciate just taking the time to listen to us, because there's so many things you can be entertained by out there that just listening to you guys talking about religion is, not everybody's cup of tea, but we're glad it's yours. So we'll see you in a couple of weeks for the next episode where we'll talk about something that hopefully we have planned better and not day of.
We got some
But
ideas, but
yeah,
we'll see.
we'll see. So we'll catch you next
You
time.
have to listen to find out.
Until the next one, I'm Matt and that's Luke. We'll catch you. So stay safe out there and enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.